Tao Meeting Archives, August 2nd, 2015. Returning to the Source by Bill Bunting.
Let's go ahead and do the meeting beginning ritual, everyone. 起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加各位点传师一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
And good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to see you all here. Once again, the background this morning is the picture of the beach in the Gulf of Mexico, taken out the back of our vacation condo down here in Panama City. And I just wanted you all to see that because what I'm going to talk about today is returning to the source, renewing, rejuvenating, re-energizing, just generally taking good care of ourselves. I'll try to enunciate clearly and fairly slowly so that I can be understood. While I was perusing text and what have you for this particular talk, I ran across chapter 40 of the Tao Te Ching, where Lao Tzu says that the returning is the movement of the Tao. The weak is the utilization of the Tao. The myriad things of the world are born of being. Being is born of non-being. And I thought this was a really cool chapter to kind of base this talk upon, because in our normal day-to-day lives, I don't know that we actually give topics like this quite so much consideration while we're in the process of trying to eke a living out of the earth and survive and keep things moving forward. But every now and again, it's a really good idea to take a moment and consider returning. It says that returning is the movement of the Tao. And all things, because everything springs ultimately from the Tao, have to return to their source. That's not a supposition or a guess. It's a near indisputable fact, irrespective of religion or philosophy. Even if we only considered it in terms of the earthly secular existence, one day what we know as us is going to return to that earth. And so all things ultimately return to the source from which they came. And ultimately the source of all things is the Tao. Even though the Tao doesn't own anything or create any attachments, everything still is part of it. Everything comes from it. It embraces and encompasses all that is. The other thing that I thought about for quite some time is that very frequently the concept of returning in the West it tends to get boiled down to dying, returning the body to the earth after death, returning the spirit wherever it came from after death, tend to be very common themes when one hears discussions of returning. Even in the context of returning to the Tao as Lao Tzu describes it. But that's not always the case. Returning can be a reaffirmation of a life well lived, a reaffirmation of a spiritual journey. For us, returning is an important part of spiritual cultivation. And spiritual renewal is a key principle to living. Physical renewal is also a key to living. And returning to that spiritual center and that spiritual secular balance is key to this existence and to the balance itself, without which we tend to bring a lot of problems on ourselves simply by the very act of trying to survive, trying to live. There's a portion of us, a part of us that requires that nurturing and that spiritual renewal. And cultivating that spiritual renewal is in fact a huge component of that returning. The other thing that Lao Tzu says is that the weak is the utilization of the Tao. And once again, there are all kinds of preconceptions and notions that go along with the use of those terms in English, such that a lot of folks tend to associate weak with weakness, and that's not necessarily accurate. The way I've tended to look at this is in terms of yin and yang, where yang energy is rooted in action. It's the more assertive, the more moving, the more active or assertive of the energies, where yin is the more receptive, yielding, nurturing sort of energy, if you will. And since yin is that soft, yielding, receptive, nurturing energy, very often it's seen as the weak energy in Western terms, where weak is synonymous with weakness. I would posit that yin is also a very powerful energy. Consider water or wind, or take a look at the Grand Canyon, the actions of water and wind. There's tremendous power in yin energy over time. And there's tremendous power in the action of yin energy in our lives, in that when we refuse to contend, we refuse to get drawn into conflict, we refuse to fly off the handle when we're not in possession of all the information we need. All of those things could be considered a form of weakness or yin. And yet those very things are the things that keep us out of trouble in our secular existence, and that help us to cultivate the spiritual self as we cultivate the Tao teachings. So, in short, returning to the center is actually embracing the yin energy. It's making ourselves weaker, if you will, and yet in exhibiting the weak, as it were, we're not exhibiting a lack of strength or a lack of ability or a lack of confidence, simply the absence of inappropriate action and contention. When we embrace the yin energy, we have it within us to be at peace with everything and with everyone, as long as we refuse to contend, as long as we refuse to meddle, as long as we cultivate the teachings in the manner that they were meant to be taken. And for those of us here in the West, that can be a rather difficult thing to do, particularly when it comes to getting rid of our preconceptions and our notions of how things are supposed to work, the way that things do work. It's always a bit of a mental adjustment, a bit of an alteration in thought processes that leads us to the point where we become more yin. And in particular, us guys, those of us of the male gender, seem to have a more of a problem with that than do the females, who I think were yin creatures by design. I've seen that over and over again in the practice of my students in the Tai Chi school. The females tend to get it right off the bat, and because of their intrinsic yin nature, their Tai Chi Chuan typically is beautiful to watch almost from the beginning. I'm not sure what that was. Well, hopefully you can all still hear me. If not, shoot me a note. And that being the case, I try to get the gentleman to emulate, to embrace that more feminine yin principle, and it's not always an easy thing to do. Lao Tzu also says that the myriad things of the world are born of being, and being is born of non-being. So while our earthly roots spring from our parents, being, our spiritual roots spring from the Tao. And the Tao, and only the Tao, springs from non-being. Since we're part of the Tao, ultimately, our existence springs from nothing, from non-being. If we go all the way back to whoever the first two people were, that only is the root of our secular, our physical existence. It doesn't speak to our spiritual source, whatever it was we were prior to incarnating in this reality. And so to renew our spirits is to return to that state before being, before the myriad things, to return to the spiritual root, that part of us that is beyond words or names or labels or explanations, and to the spiritual mother of that true self, of that Buddha nature within. I try to do that all the time. I do. I'm not always successful, but I make an effort to remember that remaining in that spiritual center is an important thing to do. And remaining there is something that I practice whenever I think of it. And whenever I get blindsided by one of those humility educational moments, which happen from time to time. I don't know. I'd like to say one of these days I'll master that. I'd like to say one of these days I'll master a whole bunch of teaching, but I don't presume to think that that's gonna happen, anytime soon, despite rather diligent practice. It doesn't mean you give up hope or you stop cultivating, but sometimes it seems like a long way to go. But this life's all about the journey. And while it's true that our lives can kind of make it difficult to focus on and cultivate that spiritual center, it's still something we need to do. And it's still something we need to strive to achieve. And while we're in the middle of earning a living and surviving and just getting by, trying to take care of the basic necessities, we can't ignore the spiritual necessities. And taking time to return to the spiritual center, to reconnect to the spiritual root, to the Tao, is something we need to do regularly, continually if we can. We need to remain in that positive yin energy all the time. Okay, we're all human. We may not always be successful, but just like the practice of Tai Chi, the practice of cultivating the teachings is something that one should keep in the forefront of their minds as much as possible. Because to ignore that returning to the Tao, is to essentially spiritually starve and deplete our spirits and starve the mind and weaken the body, and not in a positive way. The body, the mind, and the spirit all travel together as a holistic unit, one item, a single person. And what affects one affects all. So, as part of a well-rounded life of cultivation, we absolutely need to pay attention not only to our secular responsibilities, but to our spiritual duties as well, even if those things are only to ourselves. Thank you all awfully much for letting me share with you this morning. I truly enjoy doing that. Apologize for the audio. Thank you much.
let's go ahead and do the meeting closing ritual. 起立，面向佛堂，持架深鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架各位点传世一鞠躬，结班一鞠躬。Okay, guys, we are done.
Join the Tao meeting live to participate in the questions and commentary. For more information, go to http://taoism.net/tao/connect-online.